he had pretty much kept his politics under his hat until that point. He was a left-leaning guy, but when that song was something that was going to be used for Ronald Reagan campaign appearances, he thought that's not right. That's not what that song is about. That song is the opposite of the way it's being used.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, conversations with authors, musicians, and insiders revealing the stories behind classic rock's greatest songs, albums, and artists. We've got an episode on Bruce Springsteen coming up. Want to remind you, if you go to oldglory.com, you can pick up some Springsteen merchandise, along with plenty of other bands and artists there. You get 15% off by using the promo code BookedOnRock. Just click the link in the show notes or visit bookedonrock.com and head to My Deals. All right, so let's get to it. Our guest is David Starkey. He's the author of Bruce Springsteen, 1973 to 1987. Every album, every song. It is part of Sonic Bond's On Track series. Welcome to the show, David.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you, Eric.
This is a first-time appearance for you, and this is one of my favorite artists of all time, Bruce Springsteen. I was telling you, I was listening to Tunnel of Love on my way to work this morning, and then on my way home, I was jamming Born in the USA. And boy, what a catalog from 73 to 87. Let's start there. Why that certain period?
Well, I know you've interviewed other on-track authors before. If the artist has a huge catalog like Springsteen, you sort of get a chance to pick what you want to do. And to me, those first 9 albums are really kind of the core of everything. So, and they're also my favorite too. I mean, I was born in 1962. I bought that first album when I was like 11. I'm not sure how in the world that came into my hands, but I really listened carefully as a teenager to Born to Run, and especially my favorite album, Darkness on the Edge of Town. So, I had to have a kind of a deep, abiding feeling for these songs, I think.
What's interesting about this book is that you approach it as both a longtime rock musician, but also a poet. You're a poet. Did those two sides of you ever disagree about a song? The music's working brilliant here, but the words did not, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I think quite a bit. It's funny. I grew up when I was a teenager wanting to be a rock star, and I played in bands, and I play in bar bands now and have for the last 30 years. So I do have a lot of musical experience in that genre, but mostly I'm a poet. If you were to see me in my hometown of Santa Barbara, that's how you'd identify me. Oh, it's David Starkey. He's a poet. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of conjunction. I don't believe that great lyrics necessarily are great poetry, and vice versa. But I think Springsteen is one of the best lyricists. Anyway, back to your question. So like, I'm thinking about, you mentioned you were listening to Born in the USA on your ride. I think of that song Cover Me, which is a great song. It's got one of the great Springsteen solos in it. I don't know that the lyrics are that great, I mean, it's not that inventive. They're okay, but that would be an example where I think, oh, the music here is more powerful. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm not as big a fan of Nebraska as maybe a lot of people are, and so the music there, I think, probably isn't super engaging aside from, say, Atlantic City or Reason to Believe or the title song. And then sometimes I feel like both the music and the poetry are not that great. My pick for that would be Wild Billy's Circus Story on The Wild, Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
It has Gary Talent playing tuba on it, which is an
Yeah.
odd rock instrument. But then when the two come together, like Jungleland or Thunder Road or Darkness on the Edge of Town or The River or whatever, we could go on and on. Then I feel like, wow, no wonder Springsteen has this reputation as one of the great songwriters of the last century, because he can really put poetry and music together in a way that few other people can.
Let's start now with the first album, 73's Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. Springsteen promoted as a singer-songwriter in the tradition of Bob Dylan, But the album's strongest moments often come from the full band. Was Columbia trying to turn him into an artist that he was never meant to be in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no question about that. I mean, the weakest songs for me on that album are Mary, Queen of Arkansas and The Angel, which are probably the closest, purest examples of singer-songwriter material. And then I think the strongest songs are songs like Blinded by the Light or For You or Spirit in the Night. And those are rockers, like you just said, with the full band. Um, that said, I do think my favorite song on that album is Lost in the Flood, which is maybe somewhere in the middle. It is a singer-songwriter type of ballad, but it has kind of, this rock underpinning to it.
Well, the album did receive good reviews, but it sold poorly. But critics, they mostly heard Springsteen through the comparisons to Dylan. What did Greetings reveal about him that the audiences and the critics weren't yet prepared to recognize, Bruce?
I mean, I guess the biggest one was that he wasn't the next Bob Dylan after all. I think that might have been a surprise to Springsteen himself a little bit. That when just before he got that contract, he was doing a lot of gigs where he was just himself and his guitar, and I think it might have convinced himself that that was maybe who he was, even though he made his bones and spent his teen and very early 20s playing in cover bands and rock bands, surf bands. So he really was a rocker. I think it also showed maybe that he could write a singable tune, a rock tune. But I would say, as much as I admire that album, if that had been his only record and he had disappeared, I think he'd just be kind of a footnote in pop music history.
He followed it later that year with The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. And he said this was the album where he began discovering who he was and where he wanted to go. What did he find that was still missing from his debut?
That album was released literally in the same year, as you just said. I think 10 or 11 months later. During that time, the band had been playing kind of nonstop. And so there's clearly, it's a band album. It's written around a band rather than having the band grafted onto the songs, maybe as they are sometimes in Asbury Park. He cuts down on his verbosity a little bit. So that we have two big songs like Sandy and Rosalita, that stand the test of time. There's a lot of words in there, but it's not quite as many words per beat as you get in some of those songs on the first album. And then I would also say it's a much more ambitious album musically. There's that final song on there, New York City Serenade, which seems like it's maybe a little bit of a precursor to Jungleland. There's beautiful piano in the beginning with David Sancious. And so, it's just a lot more ambitious and a more rock and roll album.
The first song I became a fan of Bruce through the song Rosalita. When I was a kid, MTV played that live video. I don't know
Right.
if you remember that, but I just took to that.
Yeah.
There was something about that song. It wasn't a pop song. It wasn't the type of song where like a 10, 11, 12-year-old would be into it. The energy that he was, the energy coming off of him in that performance, and he gets up on the piano and he's just so into it. I couldn't
Yeah.
help but love that song. And I had no idea what album it was off of, knew nothing about the guy, and then eventually, of course, I dug
Yeah,
deep.
I mean, he is one of the great performers of all time. There's no doubt about that.
So then we get 2 years later, we get to the album where he breaks through nationally, and that's with 1975's Born to Run. And you describe it as the moment when his characters become more believable and universal. How did that growth in his writing shape the opening track, Thunder Road? Let's start there. And do you believe Mary ultimately gets into the car at the end
I'm
of
going
the
to
song?
answer that question first. I think Mary most definitely gets into the car because her other option are a town full of losers and
Right.
guys who are grabbing at her graduation gown versus this guy who's pulling out of there to win. So I definitely think she hops in at the end. But yeah, I think the characters are more realistic. Um, a lot of that has to do, I really think he had a rhyming dictionary for those first two albums, and he was just rhyming like nuts. He would sometimes have the same rhyme 3 or 4 times in a single line. That sort of gets pared away, and that allows him a little bit more flexibility to write like a short story writer or something like that, or like a poet. So I think that's part of it. You know, he was 24 when he's writing those songs. That sounds kind of young to me. I'm 64. But he had been, you know, he'd already written two albums. He'd been playing in bands for years. I think he was such a hard worker. And he's so good at picking out the best version of his songs. You know, he's a relentless reviser. If you look at that book, Songs, you can see how many times he goes through the lyrics of any given song. It's just remarkable. And he'll sometimes just change like is not to ain't or vice versa, you know, put it back and forth. So he's really, really careful there. I think all those things make it a lot more uh, possible for him to make these people who feel like they're real three-dimensional human beings.
10th Avenue Freeze Out, that presents Clarence Clemons' arrival as the moment loneliness turns into celebration. Stephen Van Zandt also created its horn arrangement on the spot. What did these two men contribute to Springsteen's developing identity beyond their musical abilities?
One of the things I learned as I was writing this book was that Clemens and Springsteen did not hang out very much off the road. Clarence Clemens' life was just way too chaotic for Springsteen, who was, you know, famously kind of a control freak. Um, but I think he was really important for Springsteen's conception of the band. When David Sanchez leaves after the second album, Clarence Clemens is the only African American member of that band. He's playing the saxophone, which is, you know, the soul instrument, the instrument from Soul Reviews that Springsteen was so enamored of. And so I think that's really important. And when you see them on stage together, you know, you can see how much that camaraderie is important and how much, in a way, Springsteen kind of relies on Clemens being over there, usually on his right-hand side, just as this kind of bulwark, you know, against whatever else is going on. And you know, when Clemens is playing the tambourine sometimes, it doesn't matter. He's just out there and he's an important person. You just mentioned that famous moment about at Jungleland where Springsteen is telling Clarence Clemens how to play every single note on
Right.
that famous saxophone solo. And that is, to me, this kind of weird emblematic moment because on the one hand, you know, that solo is so great. It's just burned in our brains. But to think that Clemens had so little artistic agency that he couldn't make any of it up. It just and you know there's right down just before the tape is sent off to the record plant for pressing. Springsteen is still making sure that every last note that he hears is on the record the way that he wants it. To go back to Stephen Van Zandt, I mean, you know, he doesn't play on Born to Run, even though they're touring right after this point. He's a big part of Darkness on the Edge of Town up through Born in the USA. But I like his influence a lot, and I've seen him live a few times. You know, he's got a little bit more of a devil may care attitude. If the band isn't super tight, it's all right. You know, we're having fun. And you know, Springsteen does have this sort of uh, way of getting kind of a little bit grandiose, even though I love Jungleland. It's a big, you know, a song. I would almost call it a poem. And I think Van Zandt kind of sort of cuts him down to size a little bit. You mentioned when we were emailing that your favorite album is Tunnel of Love. And you know, Van Zandt famously said this album sucks. People don't want to hear about you, they want to hear about themselves. So, you know, he's just a good foil for Springsteen. And I think that's where if Clemens is the bulwark always supporting him, then Van Zandt is kind of the little gnat buzzing around his ear.
Yeah, they had that falling out, but they got back together and have
They
been back
did,
together
yeah.
ever since. Yeah. Let's continue with Jungleland a little bit more now. Let's talk about the lyrics to this. He writes that the poets stand back and let it all be, even though he was obsessively documenting and reshaping this world. Does that contradiction suggest that he saw himself as a participant, an observer, or both in this song?
I think the answer is both. I mean, that's one of my favorite lines, obviously, since I'm a poet. But it's a kind of a weird, almost Buddhist thing, you know, the best poetry simply exists without having to be recorded. And so I kind of always think of it that way. It's got this kind of mysterious back and forth element to it. Um, and a lot of the things that Springsteen wrote about, he never experienced himself. For instance, he always says that he never worked a day in his life in manual labor, even though that's what so many of his songs are about. So I think he is both that poet down there who, stands back and lets it all be, but and says nothing at all. But he's also that's just another one of the characters in that song.
And then the legal dispute happens next. And after that lengthy legal dispute with his former manager, Mike Appel, Springsteen returned with 78's Darkness on the Edge of Town, your personal pick. In Prove It All Night, the chorus suggests sex, but the verses are about hunger, sacrifice, and pursuing a dream. What does the narrator believe he has to prove in this song?
I think he has to prove everything. That's what I think he has to prove throughout that entire album. That he's got it sexually, but that he can make it, and the whole world is against him. His own psyche is against him. We know that Springsteen struggled with mental illness for a long time, and it was undiagnosed and untreated here in the late 70s. So I think that's part of what he's trying to prove that he can do it. And you go back to Born to Run, it's got one last chance to make it real. I think that's happening in just about every song in Darkness on the Edge of Town. There's one more chance to get through this tough patch of life that the singer finds himself in.
The Promised Land insists that limitations can be overcome, while much of the album suggests that the Promised Land may remain forever out of reach. Is the narrator's faith realistic determination, or does he need to deceive himself to keep going, to keep moving forward?
I feel like The Promised Land and the title song, Darkness on the Edge of Town, are involved in kind of the same project, which to my mind is just to look into the face of the abyss and then somehow convince yourself that you're going to get past it. So I found that paradox really moving. This album came out when I was 16, and when you're 16, dark moods can overtake you, but it's one of those records that help you make it through dark times because it doesn't avoid looking at the darkness. It stares straight hard into it. And, even at the end of the album, you're not entirely sure if he's going to make it, but that music is so triumphant that you just feel in your gut that yeah, you can do it and he can do it. I find that just really emotionally moving.
I'm curious, why is that your favorite album? You were 16, so that is an age where you can lock into something and never forget it and really make that connection to it.
I think that's probably the main reason. It's tonally, lyrically, and musically, it is such of a piece. We're going to talk probably about The River next, which can be a little bit of a mishmash. Darkness on the Edge of Town, I feel like every song just envelops that mood I'm talking about, where someone has to, gird their loins and face something hard. And I grew up in a kind of hard scrabble neighborhood in Sacramento, California. That was something that I had to do a lot. And so I think a lot of it goes back to just, for me, a biographical element, autobiographical.
And I'll share with you why Tunnel of Love is my personal favorite later.
Yeah.
But Candy's Room is my sleeper pick on that album. Candy's Room,
that's so good.
Pictures of heroes on the wall.
Yeah, and that song is less than 3 minutes long, but it feels like a whole opera.
David Starkey is the author of Bruce Springsteen, 1973 to 1987. Every album, every song. 1980's The River. For this one, Springsteen originally submitted the polished 10-song album, and it was called The Ties That Bind, but decided it wasn't enough. What could a 20-song double album express about adult life that tighter version couldn't?
It's interesting listening to that Ties That Bind album, which we can get on the box set called The Ties That Bind. I think it's the River Collection or something like that, which came out in the mid, like 2015, something like that. It is so slickly produced. You used the word polish, and for sure it is. Bob Clearmountain is the producer, and it sounds like he's listening so that every single song is a potential radio hit. And the album that we have in its place, The River, produced by Springsteen and John Landau and Steven Van Zandt, is a lot rougher around the edges. And I think that better suits the material, for one thing. Also, the Ties That Bind, it has The River and Stolen Car and The Price You Pay, these great songs. But
Great
there's no
songs.
Independence Day. There's no Drive All Night. It's got some, to me, relatively lightweight songs like Be True, and then Hungry Heart and I Want to Marry You, which end up on the river, but I would not put as my favorites in there. So the 20 song album, this is a guy that we know was writing dozens and dozens of songs that never made it onto these canonical albums that were released at the time. So I think he just had a lot of good material. Now, in this one particular case, I'm not sure I would always pick the songs that he had, but I do think for sure the 20 song version is much better than the original.
Yeah, I love the river, but there are songs on there that I would skip over, and that leads to my next question. It places those carefree bar band songs right next to the stories of unemployment, the broken relationships, and the disappointed dreams. My question to you is, do those extremes strengthen each other by being included on this double album, or does it keep it from feeling fully unified?
Yeah,
Would it have been better off with the 10 tracks, but
different tracks.
different tracks? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the great double album is the Beatles' White Album, which is all over the place musically, way more than this album is. But there's something about that feels more coherent in a way. So I guess my answer to your question is depends on the last time I listened to this album, whether or not it feels like the songs are working together with a little, breath of fresh air with I Want to Marry You before we go back to something heavy like The Price You Pay. Or if it seems like they don't work. I guess in my book, I basically say I don't think that they work as well as they should. And, I think two of my favorite songs, I think two of the greatest songs of the last 50 years are The River and Independence Day. The River especially is wow, hard to overstate what a great song that is. And then you got you got Crush on You, which is really dumb. With that super annoying organ riff in the background. Cadillac Ranch, Sherry Darling. I mean, these are fun songs in a concert, but maybe they don't kind of fit quite as much as we want them to.
I love Out on the Street.
Yeah, Out on the Street. Actually, I was going to mention that because he still plays that. He played that at his last tour, and it works great. It's a bar band song. But it's a fun song, and I didn't mention that as one of my least favorite of the bar band songs because I agree with you. I think that's a pretty cool song.
Did you see Copland, the Stallone movie, where they play a couple of those Springsteen songs in it?
Oh man, I saw it when it came out. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, because they have Stolen Car in there, and I feel like they played another one in there too. And boy, they work so well in that movie.
Yeah, I'll bet they do.
And I remember watching in those scenes, and it had been a while since I had listened to The River. But yeah, if you get a chance, watch that movie, and you'll see it come up. Now, here's where things get interesting. Born in the USA, that was expected to follow The River, and the label really wanted that because Hungry Heart was a huge hit. I think it was top 10. I can't
I think it was number 2.
Right?
So
So
I think it was 2. Yeah.
yeah, they're thinking let's ride this wave, but instead Bruce releases the stripped down Nebraska in 1982, and he recorded several of its songs with the E Street Band before returning to the original demos, which he moves into this house or he rents a house there in New Jersey,
Right. Colts Neck.
Colts Neck, and records these songs on a basic recorder. It was a 4-track, I think.
Right.
And yeah, what would the full band versions have taken away from these stories?
Well, you can hear most of the full band songs on what's the Electric Nebraska disc of when Nebraska was re-released last year as a box set. I think they're pretty good, actually. They're not the big booming sounds of Born in the USA. They're more more stripped down, but I think it gives them a little bit more oomph, in my opinion. I mean, have you seen the movie Deliver Me from Nowhere?
I was about to ask you that. So I did. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen it, right?
I have indeed, and I think now that we have that out there, and it's based on Warren Zane's book, it makes it seem like this period in Springsteen's life was so crucial to his artistic development that without it, who knows what would have happened. That
Right.
he had to reject commercialism. He had to go deep inside himself with just himself and his guitar and his harmonic and sometimes a mandolin. Um, that said, that's not my favorite album, I have to say. And partly it's because I'm not sure that the music, there's a few two chord songs on there, three, four chords. Not that he doesn't do that elsewhere to great effect, but I don't know. It just doesn't resonate with me in the way that it does with a lot of Springsteen fans. So, it's one of those albums I admire. But am I going to put it on my way to work? Probably not. Yeah.
Right. Right. Atlantic City was the standout single, and they'd made a video for it. The narrator knows that accepting a criminal favor may destroy him, but believes he has no honest way out. Is he driven by economic desperation, or is he using hardship to justify a choice that he already wants to make?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the answer is both of those things. He is desperate, and he's also justifying his decision through hardship. You know, uh, it's interesting. I think of a parallel character for me is the singer meeting across the river in Born to Run. The guy who is talking to his friend Eddie, and they're going to go across the river and they're going to make a deal. And um, I think Springsteen is sympathetic with both these guys. Um, but he himself is such a hard worker, and I don't think he takes the easy way out. So I always wonder if maybe he secretly, despises them a little too, even at the same time as he can understand why they're making these decisions.
By the way, we didn't mention that Born to Run inspired by film noir. I mean, that's a big thing with Bruce. He loves those old black and whites.
Oh yeah, he sure does.
Yeah, yeah. Now, 2 years after Nebraska, Springsteen returned to the full E Street Band sound with 1984's Born in the USA. It's the biggest album of his career. The title track, the huge drums and the synthesizer sound, triumphant. The lyrics about a Vietnam veteran abandoned by his country. Was that contradiction the song's greatest artistic strength and the reason it became so widely misunderstood?
Yeah, that's exactly how I would put it. I mean, if you listen to the music in the chorus, it's this patriotic song that Ronald Reagan tried to co-opt, but you listen to the verses and they just undercut that entirely. Um, One thing I learned about writing my book on Springsteen was that he had pretty much kept his politics under his hat until that point. He was a left-leaning guy, but when that song was something that was going to be used like for Ronald Reagan campaign appearances, he thought, no, I can't, that's not right. That's not what that song is about. That song is the opposite of the way it's being used. And ever since then, he has been one of the most political artists. He's done concerts for just about every Democratic presidential candidate we can think of. He wrote a book with Barack Obama. So that, interestingly, that song kind of outed him as a left-leaning political figure.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I wonder if it would have been better suited in terms of people understanding it more if he went with the original version, right? Because the original version you can hear, I think, on those Nebraska
Yeah.
sessions, right?
Yeah.
And I remember he played that when I saw him live in Hartford, Connecticut here. He played the version that was the original one. It's darker, and I think it may have come across better. What do you think?
It certainly would have been more accurate. Would it have been as big a hit?
No.
Probably not. Yeah.
No, it would not have.
And I mean, that's one of the interesting characteristics about Springsteen is that he is his own man. He is sympathetic with the outsider. I think he always sees himself as an outsider, even, all these years later. But he always wants to have a big hit. He's not writing for a small group of devoted listeners. He's writing for all of us. And so I think he would have gone with the current version, even knowing, what was going to happen.
Yeah, Dancing in the Dark was the one that was asked of him, saying we need a hit single, and he
He
came
did
to
it.
Yeah, didn't say no. Glory Days is another big hit. And that one sounds celebratory, but its characters are trapped by memories of who they used to be. Has it become another anthem by Bruce that audiences are misunderstanding? Only in a less political way than Born in the
Yeah,
USA.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a kind of a trick that he does where you've got depressing lyrics and upbeat music, like Born to Run, the song itself is, it's got a sadness and madness and death traps and suicide raps, but it's the music is really exhilarating. I don't spend a lot of time in my book talking about videos, but this one is an interesting one. And I don't know if you can remember it, but
Oh,
he's
yeah.
a baseball player, right? So it opens up, he's got a steam shovel, and it kind of fades in, and he's throwing a ball at a piece of plywood.
I just remember he didn't have the best arm. I don't think he really wasn't.
Some of those camera shots are doing their best to hide his windup for sure.
Right.
But then it cuts into the bulk of the video is the band lip syncing in this bar in New Jersey, and they're all so psyched up. And Glory
Right.
Days, they really are having a blast. Patty's in the background wailing on the tambourine. Little Steven's mugging it up. Niels Lofgren hasn't even recorded with them really yet. Is out there. It's just this kind of wild thing. And then at the end, Springsteen, the Springsteen character who wants to be a baseball player, it turns out he's got a wife and two kids. And the wife, I think, is Patty in the background. Even though,
No, I tell you,
Yeah.
you know who I think this is
Who
what
is
I
that?
read. It's Julia Phillips, his future
Yeah.
wife.
Right? Yeah.
The actress.
When I looked at that once, that was about.
Or am
to
I
be
getting? Is that her name? Julianne
Julianne Phillips? Yeah,
Julianne
exactly. Yeah. We should check that. I'm sure some of our Springsteen fans will let us know what's going on. But my point is that he seems pretty darn happy. So weirdly, the video seems to work against the content of the lyrics, which I agree with you are kind of depressing.
They are. All right, Glory Day. Let's see, Glory Days video. Well, right at the top, it says Julianne Phillips Glory
Does
Days
it?
video. She makes a brief, memorable cameo appearance at
In
the
the very
very
end.
end.
Okay, yeah. Then I missaw her. I guess I was wanting to see Patty in there.
Now, I know she was on a TV show, but I just being a huge Chevy/Fletch fan, I just remember her being in Fletch 2.
Right.
Yeah, she was in Fletch 2. My hometown moves from that warm childhood memory to racial tension, disappearing jobs, and the possibility of leaving. When the narrator tells his son, "This is your hometown," is he preserving a sense of belonging, or is he passing down an unresolved burden?
I think he's trying to preserve a sense of history, a sense of family history, but it's history that went wrong. And it's in a place that can no longer support people like himself, right? That's why me and my wife are packing up and heading south. And I kind of feel that way about my own neighborhood that I grew up in, where I kind of hate it, but I'm kind of proud of how run down it is. And I'm also proud that I got out. And I think all those feelings are kind of mixed into my hometown, which, is another reason why Springsteen is such a great songwriter, is he's able to hold these contradictory ideas in a single song. Oftentimes just with the music, just layering it over is the keyboard is in this song.
Before we move on to the box set, two things I want to bring up. One is listening to No Surrender today. I want to get your thoughts as a poet, because I love this line. Now young faces grow sad and old, and hearts of fire grow cold.
Yeah, I think that's
Wow.
a really good one. Yeah.
But my sleeper pick on the album, Downbound Train, is that interlude when it all of a sudden, last night I heard you.
I heard you cry.
Oh.
Yeah.
Running through the woods, and he comes back, an empty bed, and he
Yeah.
can paint a picture, man. He can paint a picture like nobody else. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It's kind of astonishing. I believe there were 8 top 10 songs on that album, 7 or 8.
Yeah, let's
Um,
see. We got Dancing in the Dark, Cover Me, Born in the USA, I'm on Fire, Glory Days, I'm Going Down, and My Hometown, 7 singles.
7 singles. Yeah, and that was the record with Michael Jackson's Thriller for some time, I think, until Katy Perry finally broke it with 8.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And we can't forget Bobby Jean. It's another
Yeah,
big
Bobby
one.
Jean.
Now
Yeah.
these songs you will hear, most of them, if I recall correctly, on the box set, which it came out in 1986, live 1975 to 85. I borrowed this from my brother-in-law vinyl. And that was the moment where I fell in love with Bruce's music. I mean, just mesmerized by these performances. And it presents a decade of performances as one enormous concert. You know, they all go into one and the other, into the next. But it's a carefully edited construction. Should we be hearing this as a historical document, or is it Springsteen shaping the story of his own rise?
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit of both again. One thing, I was on the podcast, None But the Brave, and they were pointing out that there are a number of overdubs on this album. Um, and so what we're hearing isn't always necessarily what the crowd was hearing, but that happens all the time. People sweeten a live album with a little extra guitar or synthesizer. I don't think that takes anything um, away from it. Yeah, it is an interesting album. I'm always kind of disappointed that there's only one song before 1978, and so one recording of a song before 1970. It's Thunder Road, I think, uh,
The
and
very first track, yeah.
yeah. So it's like, well, they're almost by far the bulk of the songs from Born in the USA are on there. We just heard them on, in the previous album. There's a lot of songs from Darkness. There's some interesting things that he still does, like War, the lead off for his current concert series. Um, I am not a great fan of the long talking. So I'm happy that
Oh,
a lot
okay.
of that has been edited
I
out.
love that stuff,
I
man.
know.
When I was in
I,
college,
I,
when I was in
I love,
college, a friend of mine used to come to my dorm room. He's like, "Hey, can you play that one where he says?" And my father said, "That's good." That's
yeah.
I was at the river.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and that great line in there. There's mom wants him to be a lawyer, the dad wants to be like, but tonight you's just gonna have to settle for rock and roll, and the
Right,
fans
the
go
fans go
crazy.
nuts. Yeah, yeah. But the one, yeah, that I think, and then there's I think it was the river though. But it was,
I think it's the
he
river.
was
Yeah.
going to go off to the war, and they didn't take him.
Right. Yeah. They
And
didn't
so
take
that
it.
even though he couldn't get along with his dad says, "Well, that's good." Like,
Yeah.
wow, you
Yeah.
get that warm feeling inside.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So, and I'm not. A lot of my friends have seen Springsteen dozens, or one of my best friends has seen him 48 times. That's a lot of
Wow.
times. I've never done anything 48 times, I think. Um, I think I've seen him 4 or 5 times, but when he's doing the talking, when I'm there in the audience, I'm okay with it. But when I also have that vinyl record collection. When I put on side 6 or whatever, I don't want to hear a lot of talking. I want to hear some
See,
music.
yeah, very interesting because as a fan of Van Halen, like David Lee Roth he gets a lot of criticism for that. It's like, shut up, play the song. Maybe it's just more enjoyable when you're there, but not on
Yeah,
tape or when you're
yeah,
watching it on video. I don't know. It is an interesting that's a whole podcast episode there, like talking before songs. You can
right,
look
right,
into
right.
that, but yeah, that sets up the next one, which is '87's Tunnel of Love, my personal favorite. And Springsteen insisted it wasn't strictly autobiographical, but I don't know, man. It's doubts about marriage. Those emerged shortly after or before his marriage to Julianne Phillips ended. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
should we separate these songs from what was happening in his private life?
Well, maybe we should, but I certainly don't in my book. I mean, that's kind of my for each album I try and tell a story, and the story that I tell in for Tunnel of Love is how contradictory everything is, and what a depressing album this is for a man to write for his new wife, Um, and we see some of the videos when he's singing directly to Patty, from these songs. It's like, okay, I don't know. It's definitely this fragmented way of looking at things. The Walk Like a Man, that song where he's having his wedding. The song is addressed to his father, right? And how he's learned to walk like a man. His bride is just an afterthought in that. And so there's a lot of like little moments where you think, okay, this marriage is not necessarily going to be one that's going to last as is with Patty's House for whatever 38 years. Um, so yeah, I mean it's a really interesting album. You were going to tell me why you think it's your favorite.
Well, I was in college and this was like the first serious girlfriend I had where I was really head over heels. But it was one of those relationships where I just really shouldn't have been in it, like, and it's not working, it's not right, but you can't get out of it.
Right.
And it was like, there was just a lot of drama, a lot of back and forth. And it was just like, what are we doing here? And then we're just kids, really 19,
Right.
20 years old. But I'm listening to these songs and I'm just thinking,
One step forward, two steps back.
right.
Yeah.
One step forward, two in a tunnel of love. And it's just this wild ride. And man, it was a ride, the moments of elation where you're just like happier than ever. And then other moments you're like, oh my God, all we do is argue.
Yeah.
So, I thought about that. And, but I didn't relate to like One Step Up is interesting. I mean, that wasn't like he's looking across the bar, right? That,
Yeah.
and getting the
Yeah, and
message.
the woman, she ain't looking too married.
Oof,
Me either. I'm
right?
pretending.
Yeah, that's a song gets me every time. That opens with a broken furnace and a car doesn't start, and so that
Yeah.
imagery right there. But how do those everyday failures become symbols for a relationship that has stopped working?
Well, I mean that's it, and right after that, there's a woman in a white dress outside a church, but the bells they ain't ringing.
Oh,
It's just a long list of things that are mismatches. Maybe that's the thing. He's a mismatch with Julianne Phillips, um, and he's kind of realizing that. I think that's a great the furnace in the car. That's just a nice bit of poetic writing where you show something rather than tell. So this is clearly a symbol for this relationship, and then he just moves on, and right away we know that things are off.
but I did relate to that song in the sense of that need to escape because like at the end of the song he just danced. He's
Yeah.
dancing with a woman.
Dances the evening stars
And-
faded to black.
right,
One step
just
up and two steps back.
it's like just let me just escape in this moment.
Uh-huh.
I don't want it to end.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then he's back to real life.
Yeah.
But yeah, you conclude that Springsteen he's never going to equal that run 73 to 87. And I started at the top and asking you why you chose a specific period, but going back to that, what made those 9 albums such a rare creative achievement? And what is the magic in the night that continues to draw listeners back to them as you write?
Well, I think it is a convergence of factors. He was a popular artist on the radio starting in 1975, and we don't really have like the people listening to the radio. You don't really do that anymore. He was on MTV as MTV started out. MTV doesn't show music videos. So there was this kind of monolithic corporate world behind him in a good way. He's got these great songs, and so it reached a lot of people in a way that I think it's hard for music to do these days. Um, just like everyone was watching the same 3 network news shows back then. Everyone was watching MTV, everyone was listening to whatever their local, radio station was. I think there's the desperation in trying to make it big, and then once you break, as he did with Born to Run, going in to secure that success, Nebraska notwithstanding. So I think he's really focused on both how he wants to say something and how it's going to be received by his ever expanding audience. That's partly what makes this such a magical time. But it's just the bottom line is there's no other music like that out there in the world. There just isn't. Now there never will be. So it's just such a treasure to go back to these albums. And I do my share of nitpicking in here, but I mean, I really admire this man and the stuff he's done, and a lot of it has meant a great deal to me personally. So that to me is kind of magic in the night.
Now I'm curious, is there one album that you would say you like post 1987? The
You
River,
know,
or I'm
I
sorry, The
really like
Rising,
this
or
album, Letters to You, the most, I mean, it's
oh yeah,
2020. It's a damn good album. It really
yeah,
is.
Letters to You.
Yeah, I would recommend that's an album that I listen to over and over again without without any prompting. That's how I always know if I like a record. Do I want to listen to it again and again? I think that's some strong material. There's three songs from back in the day, but the music fits well with the lyrics. The lyrics are a nice balance between that stripped down writing of Born in the USA and a little bit more effusive in some of the other stuff. So I would put that out to folks to take a listen to if they haven't already.
I think I'd have to go with Magic.
Okay,
I think I'd have to go with that
interesting.
one. Yeah, although The Rising's great. I mean,
Yeah,
he still has those moments, those songs
yeah.
where you're like, oof, man, that's it. That's Bruce right there,
Well,
Still able
and
to do it.
yeah, when you mentioned The Rising, there's a song Further On Up the Road, which obviously it's his original song. Johnny Cash's version on one of those American recordings, I think it might be the fourth one, maybe it's the fifth one. That is one of the great moments in 3 minutes of American music.
I
If
don't
you
think
haven't
I've
heard
heard
that,
that. No.
yeah, take a listen to Johnny Cash doing Further On Up the Road, and you will be moved.
Bruce Springsteen, 1973 to 1987. Every album, every song is out now. You can find it wherever books are sold, usually, but online, definitely Amazon, or you can go through burningshed.com if you live in the UK. You can get it
And
there.
yeah, Simon and Schuster is bringing it out in the U.S., so it's pretty
Excellent.
widely available.
Oh, great. And where can people find you online, David?
DavidStarkey.net.
Okay. I'll put a
And I
link to
should
the,
I should say there's a kind of crazy English historian named David Starkey. That's DavidStarkey.com. Do not go there.
okay.
Go to DavidStarkey.net, please.
All right.
I take no responsibility for his comments.
Oh, no. Okay. See, now you got people curious. You just promoted his.
Yeah, I just sent everybody to his website.
That's
Yeah.
All right. David, thanks so much. This was great. So glad we can make this happen. Two fellow Springsteen fans just talking Bruce all night. I can do that anything.
Yeah, great pleasure. Thanks, Eric.
That's it. It's in the books.